Hello and welcome to Parenting Adult Children podcast. My name is James Moffitt. I'll be your host. Today we have Paul Cram, who is our special guest speaker. Paul, how are you?
I'm doing really well, James. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Do me a favor, introduce yourself to the listening audience.
Absolutely. Yes. My name's Paul Cram. I do a lot of acting. I'm an actor, performer. I'm a book lover, avid book reader, all those kind of things. And I think this will come into play a little bit later too for our conversation, but I am one of 7 kids.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Are you youngest, oldest, or in the middle?
I am right in there with Jan Brady. I'm right in the middle.
Okay. Very good. So I'm going to read this off of your Podmatch profile. I think we can kind of springboard off of that. It says, Paul Cram offers us perspective on bridging creativity and empathy in handling life's complexities, like acting, storytelling, and LGBTQ plus representation. The episode could explore how storytelling and emotional intelligence aid in navigating relationships and personal growth. So I have to admit that when I read your profile and was deciding whether or not this was a good fit for the listening audience for the Podmat or for the podcast in general. Of course, I flashed back to the fact that my son, Jeremey Moffitt, passed away back in January of this year. And he identified with the LGBTQ plus lifestyle. And I am not ashamed of that in any shape, form, or fashion. I will say that I am in my 60s and I'm somewhat conservative. I'm Christian, Christ follower, yada, 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 right? So having said all of that, I would like to think that I am not judgmental or homophobic when it comes to talking to or talking about the LGBTQ plus folks, right? I don't know whether to say people, lifestyle, folks, whatever. However you want to label it.
However
I hate
you want to
labeling
say
people.
it.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that.
So I think for some people, well, I'll just say that. Well, let's just do this. I did a celebration of life video on YouTube. My handle on YouTube is Chief Propellerhead. Just search for James Moffitt, Moffitt, or Chief Propellerhead, and then you'll see. I don't have a whole lot of videos on there, but one of them was a celebration of life video. I don't know, about 20, 30 minutes. And I talked about his life and all of that, all of the above. But let's share his picture. I think I would be remiss in not sharing his picture. Let's see. Let's go screen. Let me see how I can do this. No, I don't want that. Chrome tab. No, window. I want a window. Here we go. Share. Okay, so there he is. I don't know how old Jeremy was in that picture. It's probably one of the better ones that I have of him. He's eating something. He's got a spoon in his mouth. It's probably not one of his better pictures, let's see.
There's something around the eyes. There's something. You can definitely tell that you're related.
Yeah. Let me see. Let me go to iCloud Photos, Library. Let's do this. Okay. So there's a picture of him there.
Yeah.
That's not a bad picture.
Not at all.
And if you go down, here's a picture of Jeremy when my kids, that's Jessica Ann. I lost her in 2001 to brain cancer. This dude is Justin. He's now 30 years old, just turned 30, and he's an attorney at a law firm in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, which is just north of Charleston, South Carolina. Christina there, she is now 32, 33, and she lives in downtown Charleston. And of course, you see these other pictures. This is, quite a long time ago, about 20 years ago, thereabouts. So that's his photo. And so we'll just kind of dub this episode as a celebration of life for Jeremy as well.
Yeah.
And
no, thanks for sharing. It's always nice to not just hear the name, but see in the photo.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It makes it so I don't know. It's a really good thing, and it's fun to see a little bit of a family resemblance there, and also to hear I can tell it reminds me a little bit of my own dad. It reminds me of my dad when he would talk about myself or my siblings, right, and that sort of glowing pride and in what you've accomplished as a parent. So I appreciate you sharing that photo, and then also sharing too. I'm sorry for your loss. It's hard.
No parent should have to bury their children. It's supposed to be the other way around. But anyway,
yeah.
Jeremy, I think the last time we saw him in person was in 2009 when he came down to visit. He had his a male friend with him. He and I were disconnected, estranged, however you want to say that. We weren't real close.
Yeah.
And he was born in April 14th, 1986. And me and his mother were married for about 2 years. Anyway, long story short, we got a divorce. And Jeremy was probably 3 or 4 years old, and I was working as a senior network analyst at Herman Hospital in downtown Houston, Texas, in the Health Science Center down there. It's huge. Anyway, long story short, or maybe not long story short,
I was going to say, yeah, not really.
we moved. I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and went to work for Delta Airlines for a couple of years. And anyway, my moving that far away was detrimental to our relationship because he was quite young at that point. And I tried as best as I could to stay in contact with him. So anyway, we became friends on Facebook, and I have remained friends with him on Facebook. And for better or for worse, I had to unfollow his news feed because some of his pictures were, I don't know, over the top, I guess you could say.
Sure.
He liked to cross dress. When he dressed as a woman and put on makeup, he looked just like his mother, and that was kind of freaky to me.
You're like, this is too much.
It was like, oh no,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
So anyway, we unfollowed him. We tried to stay in contact. He reached out to me for some assistance, financial assistance from time to time, and I was able to help him. And I left messages on his voicemail, trying to keep a conversation going. And for whatever reason, it fell apart, and so we became somewhat disconnected. So anyway, at the end of December, I found out that he was in Sparrow Hospital up in Michigan, Lansing, Michigan, and he had RSV of the lungs, and then he was in ICU for 5 weeks, and I really was hoping that he would survive that, and that he would wind up in rehab. Next step would have been rehab, and then I could make a trip up there and try to reconnect that bond and get back in contact with him and repair whatever relationship was or wasn't there. And anyway, he wound up having a couple of heart attacks in January.
Oof.
He survived the first one. He coded. The doctor called me. He says, "Hey, he just coded." We were able to revive him, and so I had his best friend's mother on the phone, and I tried to get a hold of his stepdad. Couldn't get a hold of his stepdad. His stepdad called me and said, "Oh, hey, Jeremy just passed away. He had a heart attack." And I'm like, "I just got off the phone with the hospital, and they said that he survived it." And they said, "Well, he had another one, and he didn't survive that one." And I was like, "Well, shit," amongst other things.
No, exactly. I am acquainted with grief in a different way. So I really, really feel for you in all of that. And especially too, like those phone calls, when you get a phone call and it's related to that medical stuff, and then you're like, wait, no, I just talked to, those kind of things can be so.
It was crazy.
Yeah, especially that idea. It's like, no, I just got off the phone with them. It's fine. It's good. And then it's not. And then the emotional roller coaster on top of everything it's I don't have much more to say to that. It's just it's
yeah. I think one of the things that I think was the nail in the last nail in the coffin was no pun intended there, but
right.
He was very heavy. He was quite heavy, and obviously any doctor will tell you if you're morbidly obese, it's not good, and it affects all your systems, especially your heart. And I think ultimately that's what did him in was the fact that he was so overweight. And anyway, now that I've got all that out.
No, I appreciate you sharing all that, James. I just echo what you said. It's not how we as human beings, it's like we're wired to, it's not, I don't know if the word is normal for a parent to bury their child. That is just not how that goes.
It's not natural.
It's not natural. No, there's some things in there though. And I think you probably know these. I just want to echo them back to you. I so appreciate, as someone who is a gay man, I so appreciate that you reached out to your son and that you tried and you made efforts. I think also to like kind of share with listeners that are listening, when I reached out to you, before I reached out to you and was like, I'd be interested to talk with you, I also was kind of looking at the podcast and what you're doing. And I was like, like I would love to talk, but I don't know if I'm welcome. And so that was kind of my first message to you. I was like, I have things to share, but I'm not sure if they're welcome in this place. And I appreciated your note back, and I appreciated
Yeah.
talking with you. And I say that as one who I grew up in a very fundamentalist religious upbringing, and I have a duality with that, where I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate certain things about what I grew up in, and the belief system. And then there's this other side of it where it's like, that was really, really, really hard for me. And what I mean by that is, growing up in a big family, being in the middle. I grew up kind of out in the country here in the Midwest in Minnesota. My family, we weren't rich by any means, very blue collar. And I will just say, like, my father and my parents, they got involved in, when I say fundamentalist religion, they started to go pretty extreme with it. And by that I mean, like, I'm not against religion at all. Like, I think there's really great things within it. My parents got involved, though, in what this isn't even me making this up. They got involved in I guarantee they were on some FBI terrorist watch lists with some of the things that they were getting involved in.
Oh my God.
And I guess I'm sharing that only from the perspective. It's like, this wasn't just nice. This was like, oh, this is extremism. And so and that was kind of what I was growing up in when I hit adolescence, was in this environment where it's like, yeah, they're doing some stuff that is sketchy related to government and politics and religion and all these things. And there's a part of me, I'll be honest, I appreciate that they stood up for something. I so appreciate that. They just took it a little too far. But so that was what was around me when I hit puberty. And everybody knows puberty is an awkward, weird, just experience in general for everyone. For me, though, it was that time when I realized, I was like, oh, I'm gay. And I'm surrounded by a family that is, like, kind of scary when it comes to things they don't agree with. And so I really just squashed that down and did not acknowledge it. And I think my purpose in being here and talking to you too is it's the piece where I want to say, oh my gosh, parents that are listening to this, so much respect. I actually already think you're probably 10 steps ahead. Just by the fact that you're listening to something like this tells me so much about what kind of a parent you are. There are parents out there that are horrible. There are parents, I mean,
Sure.
just taking an effort.
I want to kind of backtrack just a little bit.
Yes, please.
And I want to talk to the listening audience about this podcast episode. I have had, we have a parenting support group on Facebook that we started in 2015 when when Christina and Justin were still teenagers and giving me a run for my money. And I was desperately trying to stay out of prison. And luckily I did, because I didn't want a boyfriend. And I didn't want that forced on me. And I don't like orange either. Anyway, I told my wife, Katie, I said, let's start a Facebook support group for parents and let's see if anybody else is having these problems. And we started out with 10 members back in 2015, and I think we're up to 1.3 thousand now. And so it just took off. And there's a lot of support for young children, toddlers, teenagers even, but there's not a lot of support for adult children. And I'm talking the age group of 18 to 30. And so it's a very specialized niche. And, you're going to be like episode 87 or 88. I forget which. It'll come out in December. But I was accused at one point on my, or somebody labeled me on the, somebody left a message and said, I'm not really sure this group is for me because it looks like it's Christian based. And I thought that was kind of odd because it's not necessarily faith based. Right? Mm-hmm. If it's faith-based at all, I kind of want to follow the DEI standard. What does that stand for? Equality, inclusion, diversity, mm-hmm. Equality, inclusion. In other words, I don't care if you're Muslim. I don't care if you're Buddhist. I don't care if you're fundamentalist Christian. I don't care if you're Southern Baptist, Methodist, Lutheran, Catholic, whatever your faith is. That's not what this podcast is about. And I want everybody listening to this to feel included, and I want you to know that I personally, nor this podcast, has a right or the authority to stand in judgment over anybody, right? And I think I want to say that you're probably the first gay man that I've had on the podcast. Mm-hmm. And I also want to say that I would like to believe that I'm not the only parent that had a son who told me he was gay. I am sure that there are parents out there that can identify with this, right? And so as I was thinking of, okay, well, how is Paul going to fit into this podcast? What are we going to talk about? Is this really the direction I want to go? And then, of course, Jeremey popped into my head, and I was like, yes, absolutely. Paul can come on the show and talk about his life and all of that. So that's what this podcast episode is about, is allowing you to have a platform to talk about your story. We all have stories. You have a story, and I think it would behoove my listeners, especially those parents that have children that have come out and said, hey, I'm part of the LGBTQ plus A binary. It's getting longer and longer by the day.
It
But
it's I will acknowledge it's slightly ridiculous, but yes, it's a lot.
so, yeah, I just want to let you know and the listening audience know that everybody's on equal footing here. Everybody is appreciated, loved by God, and whatever your God's name is, whatever that is, whatever that resonates with you is fine with me. Okay. And I also say, as a Christian, that I've been a Christian a long time. I was in street ministry earlier on in my 20s for 10 years in Houston, Texas. And I've seen a lot. And I've read the Bible through 4 or 5 times in my lifetime. Every time I read it, I find that there are things that I don't know, and the older I get, the more I realize there are things that I don't understand. Right. And like I said, I know that fundamentalist Christians on the like, how do I say this? In the middle, there's a lot of balance, right? And if you move too far to the right, then there's going to be extremes. It's an extremism. And if you go too far to the left, there's a lot of extremism, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I like to try to practice as much objectivity as I can with regards to these sort of things, right? And I like to not be too closed minded, right? And I'll just be honest, for the record, I don't really understand what it means to be gay, right? I just been straight all my life. I don't understand what it means to be gay. I told my son, I said, I love you. You're my son. You'll always be my son. I even told him, I said, if you decide to get married to some dude and you want me to come to the wedding, I'll come to the wedding and I'll be there for you. I'll be there for you because ultimately, as his father, I want him to be happy, right?
And I love all that. Like that's I will say this, James. I wish that would have been what my father would have told me. My father, unfortunately, did not say that. And I guess that this would be my question, maybe question or just thought for listeners and kind of why I'm here too. And it is that thing is it's like, what do you want your relationship with your children to be like? And I mean that now, and I mean that in 5 years, 10 years, 20, you know what I'm saying? Like kind of setting a platform for that. But also, what space are you making for that? And I feel like what you just said, James, reminds me of. I remember being again kind of in that adolescent. I think I was 19 years old when my dad finally asked me because I was just petrified. I was so scared that people would learn that I was gay. But there was a point when I think I was 19. I remember this just clear as day. I was standing in our kitchen. It was just me and my dad. And he just point blank looked at me and he was pretty cut and dried. And he's just like, so are you into girls? And I hope you can hear in the tone of, even the tone of voice that he used, I was like, this is not okay for me to be this. And I'll be honest, I lied right through my teeth. This was not a space in which me as his son, that I would be welcomed or that it would be, I don't love the term safe space because I think that that's been used in weird ways a lot, but like it would not have physically been safe for me, but also like emotionally, mentally, all the things like that wouldn't have been a possibility. I say this too, and I'll mention this as well. And this is what's disappointing for me with my dad specifically, is I acknowledge that there's like these generational differences. Like I look at my young nieces and nephews now and I'm like, oh, they have a little bit different perspective than I do. That's what makes all this great, right? But there was something with my dad, his brother, my uncle, was also gay and was out, and he was, he didn't hide that. To me, it's challenging as my dad's son to look at him and say, you had this in your life. You saw how hard it was for your brother to like just exist. You now have a son who's gay and you haven't done anything, you haven't taken any steps to like, you haven't talked to your brother, like, what is this experience like I have a son who's gay. Like, there was with my dad, and it's a missed opportunity with me. Like it's a missed opportunity. It's like you have a brother you could chat with. There's so many resources out there these days now, like reached a point in my life with my dad where I just was very frustrated and it was hard. And it came many, a few decades after adolescence where he and I finally was just like, Dad, I can't do whatever this is, our relationship is. And I actually was like, we got to go chat with somebody. And we did. We talked. There was a third party. And he and I kind of talked and had it out. It was actually one of the first times in my life that I felt loved by my dad because he showed up. And it was, and I was like, it was a really good thing for our relationship. Even in that space and in that time, I didn't really bring up too much about my being gay. One of the last things, because my father has passed away. I don't know if I've mentioned that yet in the podcast for listeners, but my father passed away 2 years ago, which is also why I'm thinking of some of these things. They're on my mind and stuff lately. These past couple of years, one of the last things that my dad, just when we talked about my being gay, which was barely ever. We sat down, we were at a Taco Bell, and he brought it up, and he just looked at me and he's like, you love Jesus, and that's all we need to talk. That's it. And he then he changed the subject, and he started talking about fishing. And looking back on that, like I think about that now and how I've grown and who I am. Now I would actually be like, hold up, Dad, wait. That's not all that matters. There's so much more in this life and in our relationship that matters. I think something that I probably would have told my dad is it's unfortunate that you and I didn't get to a better space in context of my being gay, because there's an entire life that I've been living with beautiful, wonderful people in it. And I think you would have enjoyed that. And I think that would have been something that my dad was a bit of a rebel. He liked people that were colorful and interesting and cool. Like, I find it unfortunate that specific to my dad and specific to my family, that he did not have what you have, James. He did not have, there wasn't this openness towards, it was much more black and white. It was like, there is this and then there's this. There was no room for gray. There was no room for a sort of a different way to approach it. So I appreciate hearing that from you, and I appreciate that exists. And
I have a crazy
question. What is it?
Here's a crazy Christian question. No, I'm kidding. Crazy Christian. Anyway, I don't want to assume that everybody in the listening audience, nor myself for that matter, understand what it means to be gay or the gay lifestyle. Or can you kind of give us a baseline, or just there's a lot of ignorance out there. I have as much ignorance as the next person. Like I've said, I'm not homophobic, right?
Yeah.
I'm very respectful of people's personal choices, right? And I know there's some debate in the Christian community about, are you born gay or you just turn gay? And I really don't want to really delve too deeply into those extremes or those thought patterns, right? But as a gay man, I want to give you the opportunity to tell the listening audience what does that mean?
I can probably not give too much into that debate other than my experience, and I can say
I just want you to define what it means to you.
Yeah.
Being a gay man.
To me, being a gay man means that I am attracted to and have love and affection for. Currently, I'm not in a relationship, but when I am, that I can love that person. And I will add into kind of what you're saying there too. I've always been gay. Even from a young age, I knew something was different. It wasn't until puberty that I was like, ding, oh, this is gay. And it just was like, oh, this is making so much more sense to me on life. And to me, being gay means that I have same-sex attraction for a partner.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
I just felt like that needed to be.
Yeah. And I would also add in too, like I think that's a fairly basic for being gay. You had mentioned some things that I think that they are gay and they're not. Like some of those things like cross-dressing and things like that. Like, I don't know that all falls under that same umbrella, but you know what I mean? That's really starting to, I believe, split hairs and things like that. But yeah, I have a lot of friends that are, married now. And I will say this, I think that I look at their lives and I'm like, they have a house in the suburbs and a dog, and like, they just seem kind of boring in a way too. So I feel like there could, when I was growing up, there was this idea that being gay was like just over the top, like sex and over, and it's like, to me, that's not what this is at all. And I'm bummed that I wasn't accepted for who I was so much growing up, because I made decisions and I kind of squelched things. And I do feel like there's a normal progression in some of our lives of like, like my brothers and sisters, like they were having in adolescence, like had girlfriends and boyfriends and they dated and like kind of figured some of that stuff out. And I didn't do any of that. And like there's
Right.
some of that just would have been great to do at that point in time. So I don't know if that answers your question totally
Yeah.
of what you're getting at.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. And I can understand from where I'm at now, especially like in relation to my father, like my dad. He grew up in a time when it was very different than it is now. You didn't,
Oh,
it wasn't even the 90s, don't ask, don't tell. This was in the 60s when, I mean, even for my uncle who was gay, like I look at that and how horrible he was treated, horrible that he was treated. Like,
right.
so there is more acceptance, and I am pleased to see too. I see some spaces within Christianity and within churches that are being more understanding and more open too. So I find that to be heartening for myself as a gay man.
I remember I graduated high school in May of 1980. So I was a child of the 70s, 60s and 70s.
I love it.
And I remember that at some point, at that time, we called them uncles. And I'm not a genealogy expert, but come to find out they weren't my uncles, they were my cousins. So one of my cousins came out, it's somehow, some way. We heard as children, or my parents heard that Uncle Larry or no, it was Doug. No, it wasn't Doug. Larry? I don't know. One of them. We'll say Larry. No, it wasn't Larry. What was his name? Oh my God, I can't even remember. Anyway, one of my quote unquote uncles, who was really a cousin, was gay,
Yeah.
and it was kind of a thing of embarrassment. And when my grandmother was alive, she was the one that held she was the glue that kind of held the family together, and she's the reason why we all had family Christmases, celebrations, and it just wasn't talked about. It never came up in open conversation. It was just kind of swept under the rug, and
Yeah.
I remember that there was a sense of embarrassment or disappointment or whatever you want to say. It was not considered normal, right?
Yeah.
And that's the only time in my life as a child that I remember that even came up. Other than that, nobody, there was no LGBTQ
Yep.
plus binary blah blah blah. There was none of that, and I guess it was like you said in the 90s, maybe 80s, late 80s, early 90s, whatever, where it came out into the open and was more prevalent. And another thing that wasn't talked about was divorce. People didn't like to talk about divorce. I mean, there were a lot of things in the closet back then that stayed in the closet.
Yes.
And my parents told me and my sister, we're adopted. My parents told me and my sister this. They said, "What happens in this house stays in this house. You don't repeat it to anybody anywhere outside of that front door." Right. And so there was a very protective sort of environment where you just, divorce happened. You knew people got divorced, but it just wasn't spoken about. It wasn't allowed out into the open to be dissected, discussed, opinions made, blah blah blah. Right.
And I was raised in something similar to that. Yeah, where it's like we keep our family issues within the family. We don't discuss them outside of that. Yeah.
And now you're on a podcast.
Now I'm on a podcast talking about it. And I know myself too, and I know and again, here's some of that duality. Like I'm sure that I'm talking about some of this because of the fact that it was such a you can't talk about this at all, and it's like, well, actually, I'm sure there's some of that in there too for me, where it's just like that. But and vice versa. I mean, James, you too are talking about your family stuff in some ways, so. It's an interesting thing there. I remember too, like just to kind of riff on what you said there quickly, like there was a moment I was down in Florida visiting my brother, him and his lovely wife, and it was one of those family events where it was like for whatever reason we all kind of ended up on a family vacation, So I was there, my brother and his wife, and my two other sisters and their husbands were there. And there was just a moment where, for whatever reason, just conversation went to, they each talked about how they met and kind of shared that. And then they got to me and my brother just changed the subject. And it's that thing where it's again, that has an impact on me. Like that has an impact as a gay man where it's just like, it's been really a struggle for me in life. I'm in my 50s now. And it's been a struggle for me to learn how to share my story and that it's valid. Like, I appreciate that you're having me on. I appreciate that people are listening and that this matters because again, to that sort of family thing, that thing that I grew up in where it was like, this is shameful for you to even exist. I'm here to say that I'm not, it's been a journey, but yeah, I feel like maybe society is reflecting some of that family stuff too, where we are talking about some of these things that haven't been. So yeah, for me, I know that for myself, like I said, there's some disappointment in decisions I've made over time. And one of them would be like, yeah, I feel like had I allowed myself to have more experiences as an adolescent and as a young guy in my 20s, dating, doing all the things, whatever, it's a bummer to me that I didn't allow that, because there's a lot of missed of relationships. I feel like we learn a lot about ourselves. I'm sure you, James, have learned a lot about yourself in the relationships you've had with your wife, with, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's just
Sure.
things that the expectation in my family was that, okay, well, you're gay, well, you just won't ever act on that, we'll never speak about it, and you'll turn into like a monk or something. I don't know, like just an
Right.
odd experience in that way.
So I have a lot of questions on your Podmatch profile, and I think we would get into a 90-minute conversation if I asked you all these questions. So I'm not going to ask those questions.
No
And
worries.
I want to give you like a 5-minute elevator speech where you can talk to my listening audience, specifically to parents and maybe even to adults that are male, female, whatever, and have identified as being gay. And I would like to give you an opportunity from your perspective to talk to parents on maybe a better way or the correct way or the healthy way, like we're talking emotional intelligence, right?
We are, yeah.
How to those situations, and how to continue to build healthy relationships, because gay or not, they're still your children, right?
Right,
You know,
right.
who knows, maybe your child may come up to you and go, hey, I identify as a monkey, and now so I want to swing from trees and eat bananas for the rest of my life. And there's a lot of strange things out there, okay, and I'm not making
There
fun
are.
of that. I'm just saying that. So anyway, that's a whole new podcast episode, right?
I would recommend that you get them into therapy ASAP. No, I appreciate that, James, and I've shared pretty much what I wanted to too. So I appreciate you having me on here. But yeah, to that note, I did jot a couple of notes. I'm glancing at them here because I was thinking the same thing. Like, what is it that I want to say? I guess I'll just kind of repeat what I had kind of initially said. But it's, as a parent, what kind of a relationship do you want with your kids, with your adult children too? And I know that takes some. That actually happens before they're adults. That happens before they're 18. You know, to my point about my dad,
Sure.
like, it took asking me right off the bat, like, are you into girls? If you think that I'm not, maybe there's some emotional intelligence that you could use there. And like, wait a minute, how would I ask this question in a way, and how do I make, am I okay with the
Well,
answer?
there's there's more to there's more to a relationship than sexual orientation, right?
Yes.
There's way more. We are a three-dimensional being, and they're, physical, emotional, psychological, physiological, their mental health. There's a lot. We're very complicated. There's a lot to us, right? And to for somebody to narrow down your identity to literally your sexual preference is really kind of narrow-minded and unfair to me.
Well, and it's 100%, 100%. I guess I feel like, James, you did some of the things that I would have wished for from a parent. Like, I would have appreciated it had my dad told me some of the things that you did to your son, which you said that you told him that you loved him. You told him that you're still his, you
Sure,
reassured him.
sure.
But I would ask parents to, kind of look to yourself. What is your part in this? And, something that my father did not do, and he didn't really utilize emotional intelligence in how he was operating. Some of that speaks to my dad's own homophobia, but also some of it speaks to what we've talked about, which is not using emotional intelligence and not maybe being aware of some of that. Some of that was, we've learned a lot in the last even just 10 years about some of these things, about emotional
Right.
intelligence and all those things. Yeah. And I know there is no perfect when it comes to parenting. And it's okay for parents that if you find out that your child is gay or queer or lesbian, I want to say too, it's okay to like grieve. There are things that come with that. Some of that, it changes and adjusts their life,
Disappointment.
and yeah, disappointment in your
Right.
and yours. So like, yeah, I would
I
say
think
be
I
willing to
think
listen. Yeah.
I think all parents love their children, and I believe that they want the best for them, and they want them to not have to suffer the consequences of bad decisions that we as parents made when we were younger, right? I thought my parents were
Right.
blithering idiots. I thought they were out of touch, out of contact. You have no clue what you're talking about, because this is the real world out here, and it took me until I was in my late 20s,
Mhm.
early 30s when I called my parents up from a payphone in Houston, Texas, and said, "Wow, you're not you're not an idiot like I thought you were. You're not out of touch, and some of the stuff you were saying is right on. It was right on, and had I listened to some of the wisdom that they tried to impart to me, I wouldn't have made some of the bad decisions I made, or not have to or had to live through the consequences of those bad decisions, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I'm chasing a rabbit there, and I didn't mean to do that, but
No, I get what you're saying there, and I would say that I would say to parents, because I have been told this too, not by my parent in particular, but I have been told like, oh, my child is gay and life is going to be harder for them, and I understand what parents are saying when they say that, and I would encourage parents to again look to yourself and look to then how can I make life better, one for them, but also just for other people that are gay and queer? Like, if life is indeed going to be harder for your child if they are gay, are there things that you can do? What can you do? What's in your control? And if there's, because it is pointing to some bigger like inequalities, like it isn't, it's only recently actually in my lifetime that I could even get married. So like things like that, I guess I would encourage people to examine your beliefs and examine like what is it that you have learned. I got some really wacky messaging, James, when I was growing up about what it means to be gay and queer. And I'm discovering that I'm like, this was not based on science at all. This was like based on something my dad heard from like his friend, just
sure.
wacky, weird stuff. So,
I remember where I was going. The point I was trying to make. It finally brain synapses finally came together, and the thought process happened. And so, what I was trying to say is that parents have a perception, or they have a projected image of who they want their child to be.
yep.
Like my dad was a TV man, and he wanted to pass down that business to me when I became 18, and I could care less. Could have cared less about
Yep.
vacuum tubes and all the testing equipment, and no, zero interest in that. And I know that hurt his feelings, and I know parents that are listening to this podcast episode, they're doctors or attorneys or plumbers or electricians, whatever trade you want to think of, whatever profession you want to think of, law, judges, astronauts, whatever, right? There's a whole panoramic view of who people are in their professional lives. And I know that we as parents, we not only do we parent our children the way our parents parented us, hopefully not, but we have this perception or image that we have of our child of who we want them to become, right? And that's why kids, young adults are pressured into following a path of going to a 4-year college, right?
Right.
Back in the 70s, if you had a 4-year degree in underwater basket weaving, you automatically got a job making 30,000 a year with a corner office, right? Well, that's not the way it works today, and I'll go as far as to say that most 4-year degrees are pretty worthless. They're not even worth the ink that's on that paper, because if you got a 4-year degree and just name something, some kind of psychology or whatever, you can't use it for anything other than to say, yeah, I went to a 4-year college and I passed and I graduated as a college graduate.
You're making entry level, like you're not making, it doesn't make a lot of monetary sense these days. Yeah. No, you're tapping into something. I would ask though this back, James, and this is the part where I think it's hard for parents. There's a balance between, I do believe like as a parent, I'm not a parent, but I have nieces and nephews and I'm familiar with the concept. There's that balance of like, I really can encourage and inspire my children to be amazing and to do great things in their career, in their lives. How do you balance those two things of like encouraging and kind of giving direction while also allowing them to make their own decisions and failures? Like I believe these two things can exist together.
Sure.
But how do you do it? Like, how do you not take over?
I think one of the ways that we as parents have failed, I don't want to use the word failed. I think one of the things that children, especially young adults, they want to feel validated. They want to feel seen. They want to feel heard. And our young adults, they have a dream of their own. They have a dream of being whatever. As they've grown up, as they've gone through the years and progressed in maturity and progressed in talents and other things, I think that we as parents miss out on the opportunity to allow our adult children to identify with who they are. Who are you? Straight, gay, bisexual, whatever, right?
Yeah.
That's only the sexual orientation part of that.
Right.
Intellectually, mentally, psychologically, where are you going in life? Where do you want to go in life? Do you want to be an
Mhm.
astronaut? Do you want to be an electrician? Do you want to be a philosopher? Do you want to be a professor at college? What are your passions? What are you passionate about?
Mhm.
Right? And I think we miss that opportunity because we're so zeroed in on our image of who we want them to be. Right. And a lot of times we want them to be like us. Like my dad wanted me to be the TV man in Quinlan, Texas.
Yeah.
That was so
Yeah.
far away from reality that I can't even begin to tell you. And he and I never had that conversation other than I did tell him one day, it's like, yeah, dude, Dad, I am not interested in all of that. And I know it today. I know more now how that disappointed him, that happened, and I remember telling my mom and dad at one point, I was an athletic trainer in high school for the basketball and the football team, and I loved it. I went to Southern Methodist University for classes during the summer. And I told my dad I wanted to be a athletic trainer for the Dallas Cowboys. I was a teenager when I told him that. And you know what they said? That'll never happen. You can just forget that dream. That ain't happening. And well, one of the reasons it wasn't happening because they didn't have the money for it.
Yeah.
They didn't have the
Yeah.
money for me to go get the college and the training, the medical training that I needed to do that. Okay, so a lot of that was reality based, right? They didn't really go into the details of explaining that. I kind of learned that over the years. Like, oh, I want to be I want to be a neurosurgeon or a brain surgeon. It's like, well, that requires 8 to 16 years of intense training and lots of money, right? And so that means lots and lots of student loans or winning the lottery, or if you're lucky and your parents are flush and they can pay for it, then that's great.
Then
But
that's great. Yeah.
yeah, but the reality of it is for a lot of kids, great. If you want to be a neurosurgeon, then you need to plan this out and we'll help you as
Yeah.
best we can. But my dad they didn't even say that. They were like, no, forget it. It'll never happen. And I was
It,
like, I was
the,
crushed. I was like, what? What do you mean? That's what I want to do. And I think that's where we as parents kind of narrow minded and we don't allow our adult children to have their own dreams and aspirations and visions of what they want for their lives.
I feel like that word that you just said there really resonates for me. And it's that word allow. Where it's also it's allowing, and I'm thinking, James, like it sounds like your parents did a pretty decent job on teaching you, like, here's how you do logical thinking, here's, you know what I'm saying, like, and I'm even thinking for myself, like, allowing. My parents were actually really good about, like, when it came to career wise, like, I remember telling my mom, I think my mom would and parents would have been thrilled had I come to them and said I want to be an athletic trainer. I came to them and said I want to be an actor, and my mom, she just looked at me and she's like, well, how are you going to do it? And I like that. Like, I like that it was like, okay, well, then what are the steps? And it pushed me to kind of like think through how that
Right.
works.
Right.
I wish that for that allowing, I wish that would have happened in a broader spectrum for my own life, for obvious reasons for our conversation
Sure.
here.
Sure.
But I really like that word allow. I think that's really insightful.
Oh, good. Well, I told you earlier I wanted to keep this to 30 minutes, and now we're
Yeah.
at 52 minutes.
We are.
But I think this was a great conversation, and
Yeah.
I want to in the future I want to allow you to come back and talk about. Maybe we can go through some of these questions on your Podmatch profile if you want, and
Happy to. Yeah.
dig a little deeper into some of that. So I appreciate you being on the podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on and for the space to talk about what we talked about, James. It's been great.
All right. So the listening audience, I apologize that this ran over 30 minutes. I'm trying to narrow this down a little bit better. I know a lot of my podcasts are 60 minutes, and so I'm trying to get it down to 20 to 30 minutes. We just had a lot to talk about today, and I wanted to give Paul the space to talk about the things that he's talked about, and to give my son Jeremey a shout out. I want to believe that he's able to hear maybe what we're talking about, and hopefully it's kind of weird, but I believe in the afterlife. I believe that once once our journey on this earth, on this mortal rock we're on ends, I want to believe that there's more to. I want to believe that that's not the end. I want to believe that there's more to life in the thereafter. Anyway, so the listening audience, I want to say thank you for hanging in here this long. If you're still listening, thank you for the privilege of your time. Paul, thank you for being on the podcast episode. You can listen to this podcast episode on Captivate FM, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcast, and Public Radio. That's the audio version. I also I upload the video version to rumble.com if you want to watch the video. We have a website. It's called parentingadultchildren.org. parentingadultchildren.org, and if you go to that URL or that domain, it'll take you to our website, which provides my contact information, email address. You can send me a voicemail, you can send me an email, and like I did on my last episode, I'm going to double dog dare you to do that because nobody's done it yet. I want to get into my email one morning and somebody have sent me an email from my contact information on my website that I pay for. So I double dog dare somebody to do it. If you write me an email, send me a voicemail, I'll respond. I promise I will. On the website, you get upcoming show schedules. Right now, I have April and May's schedule. This is May. So as soon as we get closer to June, I'll put the June and July schedule out there so you'll see what's coming. If you're listening to if you go to the review section of the website, you can leave reviews about these podcast episodes. If you're on Apple Podcasts listening to the episodes, you can actually leave a review right there on your smartphone. Please do. I also have a blog, and I post all kinds of information about the podcast, the episodes, all the topics that we talk about. There's like 30 or 40 topics that are recurring in all of my episodes. I highlight all of my podcast guests. I'll put a little blurb on there with their picture, their bio, what have you, about what the upcoming podcast episode is going to be about. So you'll get that. I also upload magic clips or short video clips to my Facebook's family support group, to Instagram. Both my I have two podcasts, and both of them have their own individual Instagram channels. So I put my magic clips on those as well so that people are following me on Instagram. Please do. We'll get those things, right? So I'm even on TikTok, 64 years old almost, and I am on TikTok. Yes. Woohoo! I resisted TikTok for many years because I just don't like a lot of the garbage that I see on it. But I have content creators that are like, if you want your podcast to go somewhere, you need to start putting little video clips on TikTok so people can see them. It's all about engagement. I'm doing this for you, right? I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for you. So hopefully all of this stuff I'm doing in the social media realm is going to get more and more eyes put on it so that more and more people can get the information that we're putting out, right? I release a podcast episode every Friday morning at 8 a.m. So I'm just going to say thank you for your time. Paul, do you have a website or?
I do. I'm not on TikTok actually, but I do have a website. I know, right? But it's just iampaulcram.com. iampaulcram.com. You can go there and you can find I'm on I think I'm on Instagram on there. You can find my social media on there, but I usually just say iampaulcram.com. Check out if you want to see anything that the movie stuff that I'm in. Cool, no pressure. But yeah.
Oh yeah, you're an actor. I forgot about that. That's crazy. I think you're the first actor that's been on my podcast.
Hey, woo.
Woo! Yeah. Nice.
Yes, but I'm not on TikTok. But yeah, people can find me on iampaulcram.com, and yeah, they can send me notes and stuff too. I don't know. Yeah, if anybody has any questions or if I don't think we said anything horribly offensive at all.
I don't think so.
I don't either.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. Yeah, but it's been really.
I might have lost some listeners, and if that happened, then hopefully I'm not going to worry about it. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to say goodbye, everybody, and we'll talk to you later.